Well, the ATF is the only organization that can be involved with a headline like this. They stole $50,000 worth of firearms that were legally purchased from a history teacher. Today I'm going to fill you in on the story of Russell Fincher and why this is coming back up into the news cycle, what President Trump can actually do to thwart some of this, and why it is important to bring it back up. And fortunately, there's a representative out of Oklahoma that's doing just that. Now, I think y'all find this interesting for a couple of different reasons. First of all, this guy was legal, totally legal to be doing what he did, and yet he reversed course. The other part of this is exactly why you don't want to combine the ATF with the DEA, because you would see a heck of a lot more of things just like this happening. So I want to hear your opinion, whatever it is. Let's go and jump right in. So here's what I find interesting about this, first of all, and that is the fact that Russell Fincher, right? The guy, the person could be any one of us. Regular guy, living in Oklahoma, he's got a full-time job, and on the side, he has his FFL. It's a normal guy. Well, the ATF decides that they are going to raid his home. Fortunately, he was in a position where he could get to the door quickly because not only was he there, but also his son was there. So he allows them to come in. They have a search warrant, and that's when they seize $50,000 worth of firearms. I've seen where it's like 40 to 60 guns, I guess, is what they ended up taking. Now, first of all, how did this guy, regular guy in Oklahoma, end up on the ATF's radar? Remember back in 21 or 22 when Stephen Dettelbach, I know exactly what you're thinking, but just hear me out here. But he said, we're going after the armed and dangerous, the big guns, which you would think would mean, cartels and gangs and stuff like that. Yet Russell Fincher ends up on the list. How does that happen? So regardless, he does. They take his guns. So with something like this, you would think that Russell Fincher has a case to be brought against the ATF. So of course we don't know all of the facts, but on the surface you have a guy that is legally in the business, he has an FFL, we know that it was valid, and yet you have this warrant and his guns are sold. So even though government agencies do have immunity, that doesn't mean they can't be sued. I'm not saying this is a simple process, but if something was destroyed in the raid, if his property was destroyed, unlawful seizures, right? You could actually bring a case, if not against the agency, against individual agents themselves. Now, another thing that Fincher said he was told by these ATF agents was, hey, if you're willing to let this forfeiture go through, we can make all this go away. Now, what was he charged with, actually, is interesting. Selling guns without an FFL. But his FFL was shown to be valid from like 2021 to 2023. Selling ammo to a prohibited person. Apparently it was 60 rounds of .40 caliber ammo. How did he know the person was prohibited? There's no background check on that. Did he knowingly sell? I mean, you're telling me this guy knowingly sold to a felon, and he knew the guy was a felon. And then I guess he made some false entries into his bound book. And he ends up pleading out in the deal. And I can tell you, just my opinion, is with a valid FFL, why would he plea out? Well, the ATF has a lot more money than you. They have a lot more power than you. And unfortunately, in these situations, it's face a lot of jail time, potentially, if you don't win this case, plus you're going to be spending a ton of money to represent yourself, or plea out, and I think he got, 3 years of probation, but of course he loses those firearms too. He's never going to get those back. The ATF will most likely destroy them. Maybe they give them to police departments, but most likely they're going to destroy those guns. Now, in what world, even if you don't agree with the Second Amendment at all, what world can you tell me where a guy isn't going around and taking the lives of people with his guns? He has a valid FFL, but most likely, again, just my opinion, he probably doesn't have the money to defend his case, but yet he has to forfeit all of these guns over without compensation at all. That's the first thing, right? Not to mention, why were they watching him in the first place? Your property, unrelated to the charges, and they can just take it, is an absolute disgrace. This is why you don't want them combining with the DEA, right? I talked about this in a recent video too, because the DEA is known for doing no-knock warrants as well. That's probably just going to increase whenever you introduce firearms into the mix. They took like $3.2 billion, the DEA did, from 2006 to 2021 without a single criminal conviction tied to it. And this guy had no prior criminal history whatsoever, and now here he is on probation and lost a ton of his firearms. So Justin Humphrey, who is a representative out of Oklahoma, actually brought this up. Now, he introduced a House Resolution 1034 to protect citizens in Oklahoma and their Second Amendment rights, but he also brought this up to President Trump. Of course, President Trump could then have the DOJ open up a case and see what really happened with these ATF agents. I'd be really interested to see how that case actually plays out, because to me, it looks like intimidation, simply not having the time, money, resources to be able to defend yourself. That's just my opinion, but that's what it looks like, especially considering this guy had a valid FFL. And maybe he gets his FFL restored. Maybe there's pressure put upon him if they find that, hey, this guy was acting in good faith, then maybe he has his firearms restored. It would be a huge win, a huge deal to highlight the overreach of the ATF, especially under Biden, and then reworking the ATF. It would really help to kind of solidify that and get more support behind the administration when it comes to Second Amendment rights. It would be a huge win for Trump and the DOJ. So hopefully Justin Humphrey and other politicians just keep reaching out. You know, maybe you get a presidential pardon, but I think it should go even further. Presidential pardon is totally fine, and that's great, but really highlighting how terrible the ATF is, especially if this new proposed budget for 2026 includes some kind of merger with the ATF. Again, I talked about that in a recent video. I think there's a better option there, to be honest with you, but you can go over and check that out. So there you go. There's the story of the ATF stealing $50,000 worth of firearms, never returning them, and making a criminal out of a history teacher. I can't tell you I know all the facts because not all the facts have been released. There's still things we don't know, but there's things we do, and it just, none of it lines up for me. There you go. There's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.